The last kingdom that we are going to talk about is the viruses kingdom. Viruses come in different shapes and sizes, but in general, viruses are very, very small in size. Many of the diseases that humans get are caused by viruses. Some spherical viruses cause influenza as well as AIDS, acquired immune deficiency syndrome. These viruses are called the influenza virus and the HIV virus, respectively. HIV stands for Human Immunodeficiency Virus. In addition to spherical viruses, there are crystal viruses. One of the diseases caused by a crystal-shaped virus is polio, for example. There are also viruses that are shaped as cylinders. The tobacco mosaic virus is a cylinder-shaped virus and attacks tobacco plants. Another shape of viruses is the one that looks almost like a spacecraft. Some of these viruses attack only bacteria. Viruses cannot survive without hosts. They need to attack living organisms in order to be activated. Any living organism could be considered a suitable host for certain viruses. In this session, we will discuss the characteristics of these viruses and how they can infect their hosts. The first characteristic is that viruses are not cells. They do not have any of the cell's features. They are composed of DNA or RNA covered by a protein coat. They lack all the organelles that characterize the cell, such as the cell membrane, the nucleus, the cytoplasm, the mitochondria, and so on. The only thing they have is the genetic material with a protein coat. This is the structure of a typical virus. Viruses cannot be called cells or species because they are only made up of DNA or RNA covered by a protein coat, as we can see here. This is the genetic material, and it's surrounded by the protein coat. Some viruses may have an envelope that they acquired from the host's cell membrane while entering and leaving the host cell. However, a typical virus only has genetic material covered by a protein coat. Viruses are much smaller than bacteria and can change so rapidly. That is why they are hard to fight. We already know that bacteria are very small in size. But no matter how small the bacterial cell is, the virus is still smaller in size. Viruses are smaller than any living cell. The host's immune system cannot fight viruses easily because they change so rapidly that the immune system might not be able to identify them at some point. Scientists do not agree if viruses are living or not because they do not feed, grow, respire, move, and respond to their surrounding. They can reproduce parasitically. Viruses do not carry out most of the life processes that characterize a living organism. That is why some scientists do not consider viruses to be living. The only process that viruses apply is reproduction. However, their mode of reproduction is parasitic. This means that they depend on their hosts for procreation. They enter the host and take over its genetic machinery to produce more viral particles. So, viruses can only reproduce after they infect the living cells in order to take over their genetic machinery. In short, viruses are not cells. They are not considered to be living organisms by many scientists. And they only reproduce parasitically. All viruses are parasites. They can only reproduce inside living cells. So, without the presence of the living cell, the virus cannot produce. The cell in which the virus lives is called the host. As we previously said, the host is the living organism in which the virus lives. There are many different types of viruses. Viruses choose the host that suits them the best. The first type comprises the viruses that infect plant cells and live inside them. The host in this case is the plant cell. An example of such viruses is the tobacco mosaic virus that causes the discoloration of the leaves of the tobacco plant. So the host here is the tobacco plant. As we can see in the picture, the green color of the plant is not uniform all over the leaves. These yellow spots on the leaves are caused by the tobacco mosaic virus. So the tobacco mosaic virus causes a discoloration of the leaves of the tobacco plant while it lives in it and uses it as a host. This is how the virus looks like under the electron microscope. They are rod-shaped. However, when the particle is magnified several times, it becomes obvious that it has a spiral shape. This is the actual structure of the tobacco mosaic virus. The structure of this virus has a protein coat on the outside and RNA nucleotides, which are a form of genetic material, on the inside. Plant cells are the hosts for this first type of virus. The second type is a virus that infects and lives in animal cells. We talked about the viruses that infect plant cells, and now we will talk about the ones that infect animal cells. An example of this type is the influenza virus. The influenza virus attacks human and animal hosts. When that happens, we get the influenza disease. The host is the organism that the virus finds suitable to infect and take over, as we said. The host for this particular type of viruses, again, is the animal cell. Now, the third type of viruses infects bacteria. This type attacks bacterial cells and modifies their DNA. So, there are three types of viruses that we studied so far. We have the tobacco mosaic virus, which is an example of viruses that infect plant cells. We have the influenza virus, an example of viruses that infect animal cells. And we have viruses that infect bacteria.